Sorry, missus, but Frankie Howard was not just camp. He was outrageously, shamelessly gay, and he tried on with anybody. His chat-up technique was quite interesting. There was a producer called Richard Wilcox who tells a wonderful story about how he was trying to interview Frankie for a possible show they were going to make together. And they met in somebody's flat in Mayfair, and Frankie, just opening remark, pours him a drink, says, "Oh, I've got this pain in my shoulder blades." He said, "Do you think you'd give me a massage?" Wilcox said, "Well, I'm not too sure about it." He said, Frankie said, "I've got the ointment here and a tube of Vaseline." So Wilcox looks even more nervous. And Frankie then takes his shirt off. No, believe it or not, drops his trousers. And Wilcox said, "Frankie, look, I'm not like that at all, I'm sorry." So Frankie said, "Well, please yourself, but if you haven't tried it, you don't know what you're missing." He was a terrible fellow for that sort of thing.
Yes, there's quite a bit of bruising there. You landed on your coccyx.
I did not. I fell on my back.
Your coccyx is at the base of the spine, Mr. Picker.
Is it? Well, it's the first time I've heard it called that.
I had the great pleasure of working with Frankie Howard in the last pantomime he ever did in Stoke-on-Trent, and I was brought in as his dresser. They knew Frankie could be difficult, and he did try all the come on with me, come to bed with me and all that business, and I wasn't standing any of it. So he would sit down and talk to me we discuss all sorts of subjects, and I found him to be a very, very serious man.
Frankie was assailed by demons all his life. I think from the moment he got up in the morning to the final time he fell asleep at night, he was his own worst enemy in many ways. Basically, it was insecurity. Frankie Howard was very much the oddball of the outfit. First of all, he was a late starter. He came in, I think, about the 14th film, made in 1968, and very much he came in as very much a loner. He wasn't quite part of the team.
Frankie Howard's time at Pinewood Studios was often spent alone, away from the Carry On team.
Frankie could be seen on the set at Pinewood, in a corner by himself, mulling over the script or reading a book, and you approached him at your peril, because before any scene at all, he suffered from enormous stage fright and insecurity.
I think he felt that team was a very strong team, and I think felt a little bit threatened by the fact that Kenneth Williams and Sid James and Charles Hawtrey and these great actors were around him, when he was really he considered himself just a stand-up comedian.
Frankie Howard was also a very self-conscious man. There's a story that he had one of the production staff at Pinewood sacked because he inadvertently walked into Frankie Howard's dressing room when he was in there and he wasn't wearing his hairpiece, and he was absolutely mortified that somebody saw him without it.
He was very self-absorbed in himself. He would analyse himself, and he'd talk about him, think about himself, perhaps to an unhealthy degree.
If you tried to compliment him, no matter who it was, he would change the subject. And I think he was very distrustful of compliments, because he'd had a bit of a nervous breakdown in his career, when his career was going at a very low ebb. And I think from that moment on, he never trusted what people told him about his talent. And I think he always felt he was winging it a bit, and he never quite knew when it was going to stop again.
I think Frankie's most loyal fan was his mum, Edith. Now, they remained terribly close. She lived in Eltham right up to her death in 1962, and she was 69. He would visit her every Sunday. They'd have the Sunday lunch together, and she remained fiercely loyal to him through thick and thin, through all those troughs, and she rejoiced at the peaks, and she helped see him through the low points. And she, I think, was one of the abiding strengths in his life.
What's going on here, nurse?
Oh, sister, he won't let me take his underpants off, the silly boy.
You're darn right I won't. And I'm not a boy, as you'd soon find out.
Come now, Mr. Bigger. We don't want to lie in our nice, comfortable bed with our nasty old pants on, do we now?
Madam, what you do in your bed is your own affair.
Mr. Bigger, all patients must wear pajamas or a bedgown.
Look, I don't care about that. I'm not letting her take them off. I mean, her a mere chit of a girl and me a fully matured male animal.
Mr. Bigger!
All right, sister, that's quite enough. I'll handle this. I don't suppose you regard me as a mere chit of a girl, Mr. Bigger?
Well, you said it.
Very well, then.
What
It wasn't so bad, was it?
Well, they were a present.
By 1970, the lives of the four main Carry On stars were in disarray. Frankie Howard was tormented by insecurities. Sid James was a serial womanizer. Charles Hawtrey was a drunk. Kenneth Williams was suicidal. Each turned to their friend and co-star Hattie Jakes for support.
Who would have thought a towel would have made all that much difference?
Well, Hattie Jakes, by all accounts, was a very down-to-earth, very lovely woman and very motherly towards people like Kenneth and Charles Hawtrey in particular. And I think that attracted Kenneth because, obviously, with having had a bad time with his father, Louis, his mother, was the great light in his life. And I think he turned to Hattie and Joan Sims and Barbara Windsor for similar sort of comfort.
Hattie Jakes was, without doubt, the most loved of the Carry On actors. Everybody adored Hattie Jakes. She looked after all the Carry On cast. She kept everybody in line. She kept morale high. Away from the film set, when things like Christmases and birthdays came round, she always remembered them.
She was somebody that you could go to and sit down and talk about your problems. Even Kenneth Williams, who was introverted to an extreme over his personal situations, he would always spend whatever Christmas he could over at Hattie Jakes's.
If Hattie was comforter to Hawtrey and Williams, then she was Sid James' confessor.
Hattie Jakes was a long-standing friend. They'd known each other for a long time from the Hancock days. And then when her husband, at that time, John de Maizière, moved into the Hancock's half-hour series, they became closer. And it was in many ways, Hattie was part of Sid's conscience. She was always been nagging him about his womanising, about his gambling, about his friendly con tricks to earn himself extra money.
Because of her size, Hattie's talents as a serious actress were overlooked. Characterised as the fat lady, she was always in a supporting role.
Hattie Jakes, I think, was very conscious of the fat jokes. They made her career. I mean, Tony Hancock did it, the Carry-Ons did it, and Eric Sykes did it, and she made a great living out of these fat jokes. But I think they made Hattie very insecure as well in terms of the way. She would have been liked to have been looked at as a woman, not a fat woman.
She's a fantastically sexy woman. For a big chick, she's hot to trot. She's got those lovely little hands and very delicate and precise. And she's also got great authority.
She was never the object of ridicule. You were always invited to laugh with her rather than at her. Peter Rogers said in his obituary tribute to Hattie Jakes, she was a very large lady, but not in size, but in heart.
If Hattie was the carry-on mum, then Barbara Windsor was the comic version of a sexy, bubbly blonde. It was inevitable that Sid James would pursue the carry-on sex symbol until she gave in.
Barbara Windsor brought that sort of bawdiness with her that the shows needed. She was the counterpoint to Hattie Jakes, who was respectability with a burning desire deep inside. Barbara was all out front, literally, in so many films. I mean, everything you ever heard about Barbara is the thing to do with her bosom.
The first pair of bosoms I saw on a big cinema screen belonged to Barbara Windsor. That's true of every bloke who's about my age, late 30s, early 40s. The first boobies we looked at were Barbara's.
And
Barbara Windsor was the metaphor for sex. Everybody sort of agreed that Barbara Windsor was tremendously glamorous, which I think, with no disrespect to her, a bit sort of debatable. She was postcard glamour.
You know, OK, there's that element, yes, you're laughing at women's bodies, yes, you're laughing at sexual stereotypes. Yeah, because that's what comedy is. It's sexual stereotypes. And if you do it with a bit of wit and a bit of flair, and you do it with great character actors like Kenneth Williams and Charles Hawtrey, you're onto a winner that will live forever.
Oh, Sadie, just a minute,
Vic,
Sadie.
you in the bathroom?
Oh, God, blimey, get back inside, quick.
Sid James pursued Barbara Windsor relentlessly. Both were married, but Sid continued to harass his co-star until they eventually had an affair. It was a relationship with a fateful outcome.
Barbara Windsor had appeared in several Carry-On films towards the end of the 60s. Sid had noticed her as an actress, but not as a person. He suddenly became aware of this very bubbly, very attractive, boisterous, happy blonde. Instantly fell in love, in Sid's own words, again, in his way. The chase was on again. He had to have, in every sense, Barbara Windsor. Several people have said that if Sid hadn't been married, if Barbara hadn't been married, it might have been the real thing for Sid and Barbara.
At that time, Barbara was married to gangster Ronnie Knight, who was a friend of the Crays and had introduced Barbara to London's underworld.
Ronnie Knight was in and out of prison. One of the times when he was out of prison, word got to Ronnie that Sid was chasing Barbara. Sid and Val went off for an evening's entertainment. When they returned to their Ivor house, they discovered there'd been a break-in and the house had been rearranged. Nothing was broken, nothing was stolen, but the message was there to Sid to keep away from Barbara. So Ronnie knew what was going on, and that was his shot across the bows, if you like, to Sid to keep away from Barbara. That was temptation to Sid. That was the chase was intensified. The greater the odds, the greater Sid had to win. He went all out for Barbara.